Dear parents or guardians, in compliance with the 85th Legislature, Senate Bill 1566, Section 14, Subchapter A, Chapter 38, Section 38.031, we are required to inform parents that a student or students in your children's grade level have been found to have head lice. There is no law in our state that addresses excluding children with head lice from school. Lice are not a public threat. They do not carry disease. As such, the Department of Health and State Service does urge school districts to ensure that its policies and procedures do not cause children to miss class unnecessarily. Our goal is to keep all parents informed about identified cases of head lice and how to treat and prevent them. Our challenge is to accomplish this without causing embarrassment and isolation for students who suffer from cases of head lice. Thank you in advance for working with our school to make sure that we have the best possible environment for our students. I've dealt with head lice before. Some girl brought it over when Misty, my oldest, had a sleepover about 2 years ago. I thought I knew what to do, and since the email came through Thursday night, I thought that I would have time to handle it. I immediately got Jonah out of his school clothes and told him to get in the shower and soap his hair thoroughly. My plan was to run down to CVS and buy some strong ivermectin. I know the stuff kind of stinks, but it does the trick. Well, that never happened. Instead, as I tossed his clothes in the dryer and then began to do the same thing with his bed sheets, I realized he was taking longer in the shower than normal and shouted to him, "Is everything okay?" When he didn't respond, I became worried. I rattled the door and eventually got it loose, running into the bathroom to see that he had collapsed unconscious in the shower. Immediately, I dialed 911 and turned off the water. I started checking him for injuries, especially the head. And that was when I saw what the school had said. It was lice. These did not look like tiny little insects that I had seen on Misty. They looked a little bigger, with larger pincers and a little more aggressive than a typical head lice. It looked like when Jonah had washed his hair, they had begun to dig into his scalp to keep him from drowning and caused his skin to become even more agitated. The paramedics came in less than 10 minutes, and we made it to the hospital in about 30. I told them what I had saw, and they ordered tests. When they got back and we were waiting on results, I asked him how he was feeling. "My whole head is on fire," he admitted. They had placed bandages on the irritated skin, and I told him to lean forward so I can get a better look. Pulling the gauze away, I found myself stifling back a wail as I saw the redness in his scalp was now much worse, and the strange tiny creatures that were digging into his skin had gone even deeper, creating cuts in his flesh. I called for a nurse and asked if there was any way for us to just shave his head and begin immediate treatment, but she insisted I needed to wait for a doctor. Jonah kept scratching and scratching, even making himself bleed, and I eventually couldn't wait any longer and went to find the shavers myself. On the way to the nurse's station, I ran into one of the techs that had been running a scan of Jonah, and I asked if the results were in. He told me no, but offered to assist me with the shaving. We hurried back to the room, and I told Jonah to turn his head, and we took off the wrappings, and the tech covered his mouth in shock. It looked like the top of my son's head was peeling off and rotting the way an old banana does. Scars and bruises seemed to cover the part of the scalp that we could see, and something told me when we began to shave, things would get even worse. I told Jonah to remain still as the tech started the process, but it wasn't easy. I could see that when the blade was cutting his hair, it was also causing pain to my son. I gripped his hand and I tried to hold him, but it wasn't working. The creatures were burrowing deeper into his scalp, and when we got down to the bare skin, I could see that everything we were doing was only causing him more harm than good. I told the tech to stop, tears welling in my eyes as I held Jonah, and he moaned in pain. That kept going for 20 minutes until the main ER doctor entered the room with the results. His face told me that it wasn't what I would want to hear. "We've never seen anything like this before," he said, as he showed me what the scans revealed. The insects were larger than I anticipated, longer and cylindrical. They had dug straight into my son's skin and even hit his bone, and it looked like they were intending to go deeper. This could cause brain damage if left untreated. I recommend a full round of broad-spectrum antibiotics, and then we schedule Jonah for surgery to get these removed, the doctor said. I asked him how long that might be, and he told me the only pediatric surgeon wasn't available until Monday. Meaning my son will be writhing in pain and experiencing possible damage in his mental health because no one here is qualified, I asked in shock. They admitted there was little more they could do, but they attempted to contact other hospitals in the Tri-County area. I sat there for an hour trying to decide what I should do as Jonah continued to try and scratch. Eventually, I asked the nurse to bind his hands to a stretcher as I realized his nails were ripping off bits of flesh. The nurses and other staff seemed to begin to give us a wide berth, and I got the idea they were frightened by the unusual conditions as well. Another hour passed, and they gave Jonah a sedative to let him rest as I checked his scalp. The damage these things had done to my son's head was beyond horrific. They had caused large scars to cover every bit of his forehead and cranial area, eating up his skin and burning away any of his tissue and muscles. I could even see faint hints of his skull where there was bruising. In that moment, I sobbed and took out my phone. Desperation made me call Jonah's dad, someone that I hadn't talked to in almost 2 years. I can pull some strings and get to him a surgeon, but we'll have to drive all night to get here, he said. I told him it was worth it, and then demanded they let me check Jonah out so that we could begin the drive. Of course, the doctors advised otherwise, but I wasn't about to just let him lay there suffering for a few more days. Putting him in the back seat of the car, I gave him pillows and blankets to keep him comfortable and began the drive. It was so late and I was exhausted, but I pushed through, constantly checking the rearview mirror to see his condition. He woke up about an hour into the drive, moaning in pain and asking me to pull over. "Sweetie, I can't. I'm trying to get you to a doctor," I told him. He began to vomit blood in the back seat, and I braked hard. Putting my flashers on, I got out of the way of oncoming traffic and unbuckled. "It hurts so bad, Mom," he said. I offered him the last of the pain pills as I stared at the bandages around his head. They were soaked in blood from the damage these insects were causing. He tried his best to swallow it. Then I laid him back down and gave him a McDonald's bag to keep puking into. I had to focus on the drive. My mom called about 10 minutes later, checking on us and reporting that Misty was sound asleep. "How's our boy? Did you get that lice handled?" she asked. She seemed to think my trip to the hospital was an overreaction, and before I could explain the situation, he vomited again, and I hung up. All Jonah could do was shake and scream, begging me to give him more medicine, but I had nothing to offer. I sped up, placing my emergency flashers on. I had to get to my ex-husband as quickly as possible. I made it there by 3:30 in the early morning, and drizzle came down as I pulled my car up to the ER that he told me to head for. Jonah had been scratching again, and the bandages were torn apart. His head hardly had any skin left. It was now just a mangled mess of blood and loose hair and tissue. He pulled back his bloody nails, and I saw bits of bone from his skull were also tearing off. As the rain hit his scalp, he shuddered in agony. "My God," my ex said when he saw how bad it was, and they rushed our son towards the operating room. He had dozens of questions, but neither me nor any of the surgeons had answers. They began to get Jonah prepped for an attempt at extracting these damn bugs when we got more bad news. Scans reveal these things are like fishing barbs. They burrow deep through the skin and the tissue and then latch on to prevent themselves from being taken easily. "There's a risk this could cause more harm to your son than good," the head surgeon told us. I was trying my best not to hyperventilate. "Just do whatever you have to do to help him," I begged. They promised me that they would. I had to sign a mountain of paperwork which gave them consent and, of course, waived any liabilities. Jonah was unconscious from the pain, but his body was still reacting to it. His stats were rising along with his core body temperature. I was certain that the insects were already attacking his brain. Thankfully, my ex-husband didn't have the opportunity to spew hateful words at me about being an awful mother. Instead, we were both in an almost catatonic state as we waited for some good news. But good news never came. The doctors came out about an hour later to inform us that Jonah was not showing any signs of brain activity. His body's still fighting, but it doesn't look like he'll be returning home the way that he came here, they admitted. One of the surgeons said this gave them an opportunity to quit being cautious, and they began to extract the slimy, writhing bugs. When I got a chance to see one before they killed it, the thing reminded me of a long, thin centipede, covered in prickly needles. I'm certain that it hissed and shrieked as the doctors crushed it, and continued to remove others. 6 hours later, there was no bugs left, and our son was in a medically induced coma. It felt like I was dying, seeing him suffer, and I felt powerless, not knowing if he was going to be okay. I found sleep only thanks to exhaustion. When I woke up, it was this morning, and I charged my phone. Mom had called me twice. "Hey, sorry I missed your call." "Yeah, Jonah's fine," I said groggily. No, it's fine. I just wanted to give you a heads up about Misty." I became more alert almost instantly. "Is something the matter?" "Well, it's just that she's complaining about her head itching really badly." "What? Is she okay?" My heart dropped at her response. "I'm sure she's fine. I sent her to school. You know, she has that field trip today. I mean, it's just head lice, right?" "Stepbro, can you help me?" The words woke me from my nap like a slap to the face. I sat up in confusion, groggily wiping the sleep from my eyes as I looked around the dim room. The door to my bedroom was open, and the portentous light of the hallway loomed in the distance. While my mind scattered to recollect what was going on, I felt for my phone in hope of clarity. The screen was blinding. No missed calls, no texts, nothing. Only a little caution sign in the upper right corner near the battery. No service. "Hello?" I called, swinging out of bed. I was shocked that I was hearing anything at all. I'm usually a really heavy sleeper. The house felt empty, abandoned even, a feeling I was still getting used to in the new house. My mother had recently remarried after over a decade of being single. The man had money, the kind where your house echoes because there's not enough furniture or bodies to fill the space. The only thing stranger than your mom shacking up with someone 15 years older than her is house-sitting their empty home on spring break. "Lisa!" I called once more and got nothing but silence. Lisa's my stepsister, whereas I had volunteered to sit out their ravishing vacation in exchange to catch up on Elden Ring and jerk off in peace. Lisa had skipped to go wild while Dad was away. Our dorms were closed for the holiday, making each other annoyed acquaintances for the week. We're both in our early 20s and single, and we don't care much for each other. I remembered laying down for a nap in preparation of pulling an all-nighter while Lisa waited for her ride, dressed in an outfit her father would shriek at. She said she'd be back late, and it was only 9 p.m. "Hello?" My voice echoed again. Standing in the doorway, the house was especially dark. Every light was off, the only residual glow coming from a single doorway downstairs. The laundry room. "Stepbro, can you help me?" A voice beckoned from downstairs, making me jump. It was faint, but just loud enough to hear. It sounded like Lisa, but it sounded muffled. I sighed, already irritated. "Lisa, what are you doing? I thought you were out," I called, heading down the hall. I flipped every switch as I went, trying to bring in as much light as I could. The place was creepy in the dark. "I came home to change," she slurred like she'd been drinking, "and I got stuck." Down the stairs, past the framed doctorates and awards. "Stuck in what?" I asked on the stairs, awaiting the reply. There was a moment of silence, like she was thinking about it. "The washing machine. Can you help me?" she answered pitifully. She had to be fucking with me. "Are you fucking with me?" I asked, scoffing. The implication of the situation was not lost on me. No, I'm not. Look, I got sick and threw up, stepbro. Like a lot. I couldn't keep enough down. I tried to get some clothes out of the change and I got stuck, alright? Now will you help me out or not, please? I looked at the bright doorway of the laundry room. The tiles, stark white and pristine. Something felt wrong, like I was being set up. I thought maybe it was some kind of prank, like a TikTok trend, you know? I considered just leaving her there. I mean, she was a bit of a brat, and she'd been nothing but unpleasant since the recent marriage. Just about to turn and go back to my room when she started to scream, "Stepbro, help me out of this fucking thing, or I'll call the police and my father, and then you'll—" All right, jeez. I'm coming. Settle down, will you? Stop calling me that. I sighed and hurried down the stairs, shuffling to the laundry room. Lisa cleared her throat like she was choking back vomit before muttering a muffled apology. "Thank you." The voice was deeper and cracking towards the end. "God, how much did you drink? It's still early," I muttered, stopping when I rounded the corner to the laundry room. The sight before me was ridiculous. The laundry room was so bright it was blinding. Overhead, fluorescents beaming above the clean floor and matching set of machines. The dryer and washer were next to each other, with a linen closet on the other end. Hanging out of the expensive front-load washing machine was Lisa, only her lower half visual. It was like she had tried to climb in and fallen asleep. Not only was she not stuck, she wasn't moving at all. "Lisa?" I asked, looking at her. The room was so quiet, it was unsettling. I expected vomit, a spilled purse, something, but it was just Lisa in the washer, her hands tucked inside like she was using them as a pillow. She was wearing the same outfit she had gone out in, a striped bodycon dress so tight you could see her panty lines, and platform heels. One of the heels was missing, leaving a single set of painted toes laying against the tile. "Lisa, are you all right?" I asked from the doorway, not wanting to go in. "Help me, stepbro, I'm stuck," she said, her voice whinier than usual. Bullshit, you're not stuck, you're just laying in there. What is this, a joke?" I asked, looking around the room for her phone, for the setup. But there was nothing but white, no cameras. No one hiding around the corner recording. "No, please, I really need help, I swear." Lisa started to sob, her voice breaking to the point of babbling. "Help me, stepbro, please." Except she wasn't moving. Not even a little. It didn't even look like she was breathing. But the inside of the washing machine was dark, and I could only see the faint outlines at the back of her head. Her bob, haircut, tossed and completely still. "What's happening?" It was all I could ask. The hair stood on the back of my neck, my palms sweating. The way she just hunched in there, not even kicking her feet. The same recited lines repeated again. "Help me, stepbro." Even as she laid face down, she looked pale, sickly, and the harder I looked, the more it looked like her face was submersed up to her ears, and it looked like, "Help me." Blood. It felt like I wanted to puke. I reached in my pocket for my phone, a cold sweat beating on my forehead as I cleared my throat. "Lisa?" "Yes?" "What's my name?" I pulled up my phone and unlocked it, bringing up the keypad. What? What do you mean, she started, her voice starting to break character. "No service." "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Lisa's voice was deep and struggling, like she had a wet rag over her mouth. Her skinny arms reached to the mouth of the washer and started to pull herself out, and I could hear a trickling of liquid from the matted strands of her hair. She pulled her head from the washer, and with it a splash of deep red that washed over the tile. Her face was gone. Oh, God. Lisa's devastated cavity of a face coughed, a sputter of blood painting the wall next to her. She reached for me with mangled hands, each digit broken in different directions. She tried to stand with her bare foot and slipped. I left her there. I ran as fast as I could, bounding up the steps to the sounds of her trying to get up on the slippery tile. A guttural moan echoed after me, an angry call that chilled my bones. The lights flickered at the sound, blinking erratically until the noise stopped. Back down the hall and into my bedroom, I slammed the door behind me and locked it, frantically looking around somewhere to hide. I could hear them coming. One bare foot, followed by the heel. It was clumsy, but it was gaining fast. I considered hiding under the bed, but it was too low to the ground, and I didn't know if I'd fit. I didn't want to get stuck myself. Lisa slammed into the door, and the hinges rattled. It wasn't going to hold for long. I didn't have enough time. The closet was my only chance. I opened the door as quickly as I could and ducked into the clothes, pulling it behind me before huddling under them in a ball. As soon as I sat on the carpet, I heard a squelch, like I had sat in something. As a cold, wet substance soaked into the seat of my pants, the door to my bedroom exploded. Wood splintered inward, and I watched through the slats of the closet door as Lisa slithered in. She wormed her way through the hole in the door, the bleeding crater in her face reverberating angrily as her head whipped around. She flopped on the bed first, and when she couldn't find me, she slithered underneath it. I watched in horror as she would temporarily pause after every movement to sniff the air, her head twitching as she knocked things over in my room in the process. "Step, bro," the monster gurgled slowly, moving impossibly as it blindly scoured the room. It twisted so far I heard ribs break, and when it propped itself up with its hands, the flesh would tear, exposing bones. Wrists cracked, knees twisted, and tendons tore. With an angry shriek, the monster slithered out of my room. I heard it rampaging through the house and into my mom's room and then into Lisa's when it couldn't find me. And when it had no luck, I heard it moving downstairs, and I listened to its path of destruction as it tried to find me. When it got quiet for a while, I chanced to look at my phone to see what I was sitting in. As soon as the light went on, I had to resist the urge to scream, holding my breath and nearly pissing myself when I finally saw it was soaking into my clothes. The carpet was caked in blood. A splotch of heavy crimson that had sprayed outward and onto my clothes. Inches away from where I sat was a single high-heeled shoe. A blood-stained phone. Lisa's. I wiped the blood from her phone and unlocked it to see the same sickening icon of no service. I tried calling 911 with both her phone and mine. The call just wouldn't go through, even when you hit emergency service. I tried to check her recents, see if I could find any answers to what was going on. Her call logs showed several incomplete calls. 5 to the police, 4 to her father, 7 to me. None of them were able to connect. I checked her texts. The last one that went through was outgoing, a response to contact labeled only as him. It said, "Still picking you up? I want to get up in some guts." To which she replied with a thumbs up emoji. I don't know who him is, but it's not the part that unsettles me the most. It's the 9 failed texts that she sent to me that never made it through, while I was 5 feet away, sleeping. "Kyle, wake up. My Tinder date followed me home. I'm hiding in your closet." "Kyle, what the fuck? He's in here. I don't have service. I tried to wake you up. I think he can hear me. I don't want him to find me. Kyle, wake the fuck up. Kyle." I've been in here for a while now. My phone's about to die. I don't know what it is, but it's still down there. I would have tried to sneak past it, but it hears everything. I even had to mute my keyboard on my phone so I could type this out. I tried calling my mom, the police, my stepdad. Nothing will go through. It just says that I don't have signal. I thought of jumping out the window, but I think it'll get me before I can get out. It's gotten faster the more of Lisa it leaves behind. Last I heard, it was moving things around and stacking them like it's trying to keep me from getting out. I'm going to try to post this somewhere and see if I can get enough signal for it to go through. If you get this, please, send help. And if you get in here, do not help her out of the washing machine. Lisa, I'm sorry. I think I might try the window after all. It began as a freak snowstorm. I've been hiking and camping in the woods outside of Kashmir since I was in high school. It was a spot I used to like to come to with my friends before they all got too busy to return to nature every now and again. The wilderness in North Georgia is just so beautiful. It's a great place to immerse yourself in nature and return to your roots. This weekend, however, I found myself at nature's mercy instead of its beauty. Actually, maybe not nature. The longer I stay here, the more I suspect something insidious might be in this place. When I had set up my tent Friday afternoon, the temperature had been a bit crisp, but nothing out of the ordinary. Spring had been in bloom, and it seemed unthinkable that it could get below 50 degrees in the daytime. I had been meaning to hike deeper before coming back out again on Sunday, but when I woke up to find snow, I decided my weekend must be a bust. After gathering the gear I could find, I'd been hiking back to my truck, but I must have gotten turned around. As the day faded out, I realized how lost I'd become. My usual landmarks were either covered in snow or changed so drastically that I couldn't even recognize them. The needle kept turning and turning, leading me in circles as I wandered through the snow. As I got more and more turned around, the night began to creep up on me. I was soon watching the sunset as I thought about whether or not to put up my tent or keep walking. And that was when I saw the light. It was small, like a candle on a windowsill. I had never seen any houses out in the woods before, but it was possible that someone had built one in the 6 or 8 months since I had been out here. I began heading in that direction, and as I did, I saw a cabin begin to materialize amidst the snow. A candle was burning in the windowsill, and as I approached, began to look for signs of life. I saw no four-wheelers or any means of getting in or out, and the thought of someone just living in the woods was a little strange. I was certain to make a little noise, whistling and crunching loudly through the snow as to not startle anyone who might not want company. The cabin was not the sort of pre-made ones that you sometimes saw in showrooms. It looked like it might have been made out of sturdy trees, and the wood looked new and raw. Someone had built this recently, and it made me even more aware of whoever was inside. It was pretty likely that a gun lived there as well, and I was in no hurry to be a squib on a local paper. As I knocked on the door, I felt a little like Goldilocks trying to introduce myself to the 3 bears. I don't know what possessed me, but when no one answered the door, I tried the knob. It opened easily, the door having not been locked, and I stepped out of the snow to find a fire roaring in the grate of a 1-bedroom cabin. It was humble. A bed, a table, a large bookshelf that seemed to stretch the length of the one wall, some chairs, and a fireplace. It was so warm after having come out of the cold that I couldn't help myself. I stepped inside and I made a beeline for the fireplace. I was careful not to track snow in, leaving my boots and pack on the front porch in hopes that whoever lived there would recognize that I was here and not be startled. I didn't know where the owner of the cabin was, but if they were out hunting in this weather, I wasn't likely to receive a warm welcome. Either way, I didn't think I had any options with the snow falling and the night fast approaching. I sat by the fire, and as the flames dried my clothes, I couldn't help but look at the large bookshelf that stretched across the wall. It was floor to ceiling, and as big as it was still space for more books. The books were numerous, about 30 in all, and their spines had the names of people instead of titles. My curiosity got the better of me, and I went and took the first one down. The name Jeremy Blake was printed in gold leaf on the spine. When I opened it, they cracked in that satisfying way old books do. The owner of the home probably wouldn't appreciate me perusing their bookshelf, but I figured I'd already had enough to apologize for. What's one more thing? The inside was written in what appeared to be real ink, and the handwriting was delicate, practiced. Whoever Jeremy Blake had been, he had been a very dab hand when it came to writing. I had assumed that it was biographical, but the book didn't look old enough to have been written in 1736, as it claimed. Jeremy talked about being out hunting deer with his brothers when they were suddenly set upon a snowstorm. It had been snowing when they had set out, but what they now found themselves in was a blizzard. His brothers had left him when he couldn't keep up, but Jeremy thought that he was about to die, and that's when he saw the light out in the woods. He talked about coming upon the cabin and how it had seemed empty but lived in. Like me, he had decided to thank the owner when he returned and set about pinning this in his journal, which he had brought with him. I pray the snow passes quickly. I would love nothing more than to return to my father's home so that I might chastise my brothers for leaving me in such a sorry state. The next entry was a bit different. Jeremy had woken up to find that no one had returned to the cabin, and that the snow was still falling outside. He had thought it looked a little better, and now that he was warm, he had thought that he might try to make it home again. Jeremy had opened the door to leave, but upon stepping out, he had walked right back into the cabin instead. He had tried this several more times, but always found himself stepping back into the warm, inviting cabin. There was only one door, and when he had tried to break a window in his fervor, he found that they would not break. He became a little bit upset, fearing that he stumbled into some kind of devilry. He tried to leap through the window, nearly knocked himself unconscious. He had destroyed the house, flipping over tables, throwing chairs. None of them had broken. And when he turned around, it all resumed its previous position, and Jeremy was certain he had found himself in a witch's den, and was now more afraid. The next few days were full of entries about Jeremy continuing to live inside the cabin and discovering what it was all about. He found that he did not need to eat or drink, which was both a blessing and a curse. Despite not needing these things, he found that he was always hungry and constantly licking his lips when his mouth felt dry. He watched from the window as the snow began to melt, and as winter became spring. He watched animals roam outside the cabin. After a while, his entries became a journal of what he had seen from the cabin's windows until I discovered the last entry in his long series of observations. I know not if anyone will ever read this. I suppose it matters not. I have existed in this house for a long, long time. I cannot say how long exactly, but I was not even 15 when I came in out of the cold. And now when I look at the glass over the fire, I see an old man staring back at me. I don't know how much longer I will survive, but today I saw another person. For the first time in a long time. I was looking out the window, watching the snowfall again, when a child came hesitantly from the tree line. He was looking at the same candle that had brought me here, but his eyes got big when he saw me. He took a step towards the house, meaning to come inside or ask who I was, but I shooed him away. I think now that I should have let him open the door to see if I could escape. But I couldn't take the chance of the boy being stuck as well. Better to die alone here than have some young fellow watch me pass. He scampered away when I banged on the glass and yelled at him. Probably for the best. I'm going to stop now. This journal does nothing but remind me that I am alive. Maybe it would be better to be dead. I wasn't sure what to make of the journal. Was it real or some make-believe story the owner had concocted? I looked at the bookcase and wondered if they were all like that. It was dark outside now, so I took the second journal over to the fireplace so I could read it in the roaring firelight. A pine knot cracked as I got comfortable. The whole experience was very rustic. The handwriting was a little rougher, but the same as the beautiful script of the previous one. Inside were the musings of a woodcutter. His writing was shorter and more surface level. He had gotten lost while chopping wood and found the cabin on his way home. He stopped to see who lived there and got himself trapped inside, just like the writer before him. He had used his axe to try to break free, but to no avail. Taken up the book that he found on the shelf and began writing it to pass the time. It wasn't much, 3 or 4 pages before he stopped. He wrote about watching squirrels, seeing a deer, worrying that he would starve when he didn't find food in the cabin. Whether he died or became bored, I don't know. He stopped writing after the 5th page, signing Roland Wood at the bottom. Same name on the book's spine, written in the same rough gold leaf that the words were written in. The next diary turned out to be a kind of fantasy story, something my grandpa would have called an haute opera. It talks about pioneers on the trail, one of them breaking off into the night and have a call to nature, He finds a strange cabin with a flickering candle, and once he went inside, it refused to turn him loose. He spent a few pages talking about being trapped in the cabin, and when his sister came to look for him, he saw her banging on the window to get her attention. She looked up, clearly startled, and ran away before she could help him. Whether she had seen him or not, no one ever came to look for him. And the rest of the journal was spent telling the story of the pioneers and what they must have seen on the trail. His sisters seemed to be the main character, and he talked about the Indians that they fought, the animals that they hunted, and the things they survived on the way to their home. Eventually, she married a man, and the two lived on the prairie, with their growing family on the outskirts. Towards the end, he must have become a little jaded with the whole thing as the story took a dark turn. His sister, her husband, and her children became riddled with hardships as the Indians descended upon their house, burning their crops and killing them all. His sister watched her family suffer for the crimes of leaving her brother behind. The journal ended with her finally being allowed to die at the hands of her captors. He signed it William T. Pitt on the last page. And when I looked up from the story, I realized it was daytime again. As the snow rattled loudly against the windows, I had to wonder if it had only been a day. Jeremy's journal had made it clear that the concept of time was a little wobbly. Had I been here for a day, a week, a year? I really had no way to know. The snow was still blowing outside, but it didn't have to be the same storm that had brought me here. I looked at the door as I got up to put the book away and wondered if I would find myself stepping right back into the cabin. I took a step towards the door, but I wasn't bold enough to try it yet. I needed more research first. With little else to do, I picked up the 4th journal. I noticed that William Pitt was on the spine of the 3rd one as I put it back, and Beverly Stryker was on the spine of the one I took down. It seemed that the cabin had finally attracted a female resident, and I was interested in getting her point of view on the whole situation. Beverly's story was a little different from the others. Mrs. Stryker was in trouble when she found the cabin. Beverly had been fleeing into the night to escape her abusive husband. She hadn't wanted to marry him. He was not the sort of man that women like to often marry. But she had made the mistake of falling for him when she was younger, not realizing what a brute that he was until it was too late. By then, her father had decided if his youngest daughter wanted to marry someone so far below her station, then he would let her. He had enough useless mouths to feed, useless mouths in need of dowries, and her husband had asked relatively little from him by way of a dowry. The two had been wed less than a year when Beverly had run away the first time. He had found her easily enough. Her husband was a hunter, and her trail had been easy to follow. He'd had his farm hands tie her in a barn and whipped her with a horsewhip that he used on the colts that they had been breaking in. Her skin had been covered with welts, broken and red from the lashings, and Beverly had been left in the barn overnight to think about what she'd done. She thought, all right, but it wasn't about the reflections that her husband had been thinking. Beverly lay in the filthy hay all night thinking about her current situation and planning her next escape attempt. She played the dutiful wife for the next 3 months, filling his cup, cooking his dinner, keeping his house like he liked it, until her husband grew lazy again. He stopped having the hands watch her so closely. He stopped locking the bolt every night so she couldn't escape. He stopped putting the dogs out every night so they would alert him when she left. And then, one night, she ran. But not fast enough. He was after her sooner than expected, and she heard the baying of the dogs and the clomp, clomp, clomp of the horse hooves. She was running through the woods, the early autumn chill sending goosebumps up her skin. She hadn't gotten dressed in anything heavier than a shift. If he'd caught her getting dressed, he'd have known she meant to run, and so now she ran into the light of the late-year moon, her body bathed in the golden light as she fled for her life. When she had fallen, she had expected to be ridden down out of hand. But the hooves and the dogs went past her as she lay curled in the bough beneath the tree. The roots made a kind of cage. Beverly looked through the bars as she listened to the insects and the night birds sing their song. She expected to be found, expected to be caught. But as the night deepened, she found it was only her out here in the wilderness. The dancing lights had stolen her from her worries, and that was when she noticed the candle. Beverly had found the cabin and was trapped by the enticing cage. There wasn't much after that. She'd written a little more, but nothing as exciting as the night-long run through the forest. She read the journals, discovered she couldn't leave, but it was none of the fear or uncertainty the others had shown. She was content in this place, a place her husband could never find. She lived inside the cabin, updating the journals sparingly, and passing away with nothing to show for it, and no one the wiser. I looked at the door again, but the next book looked so inviting. Books became my food. I devoured them, rereading some of them and taking their stories in. The cabin had attracted many in its lifetime, and I wondered how many more had chosen not to write. How many had suffered in silence here? How many had simply wasted away with nothing to mark their passing except for their memories? Those who had written had left behind everything from pages and pages of observations to short little stories about nothing at all. They wrote fantasies, westerns, slice-of-life stories about the people they left behind, and it all became more and more modern as time went on. I don't know how long I sat there reading, but it was snowing again when I looked up to find a journal with my own name on it. I opened it and found the pages as white and blank as the landscape outside my window. The doorknob was cold when I wrapped my hand around it. The wind was cold as it blew snow through the open door. My boots were still on the porch, but they looked old and weathered and beaten. The backpack was gone, likely dragged off by some wild animals while I was reading. The boots had been tan when I brought them less than a year before I entered the cabin. Now they looked bleached, the fabric thin as a mummy's cheeks. I wanted to reach out and touch them, see if my fingers would go through the thin skin of the boot, but I knew I'd never get close to him. I stepped out onto the porch, and I found my foot coming down on the hardwood floor of the cabin. I closed the cabin door and went back to the fire, picking up the journal with my name on it. If you're reading this, then it's already too late. I don't know if this place is supernatural or just some odd pocket out of time, but I do know that it's a trap. I don't know if there's any escape from this place, but I know that no one is coming to look for me. I hope my diary is the last, but I have no doubt there'll be others. The house seems to draw us to it, collecting stories as it collects lives. At least, I'll be warm before I die. I look down at what I've written, unsure of what else to say. It's barely a page. And the effort seems lame. I'm the writer. I've never done more than emails or text messages, but as I struggled to find something to add to it, the futility of the exercise hit me all at once. If someone read it, they would be trapped anyway. My warning wouldn't help them. My eyes slipped over to the fire as I thought about just burning it. Would it burn? I didn't know. But if the cabin wanted lives, then I'd give it what it wanted. And I turned back to the door and thought of something a little different. An experiment that might bear results. The book thumped onto the porch when I tossed it. When I turned back to the bookshelf, it hadn't returned to its spot. The snow skittered across the pages, leaving wet runners on the paper as they marked them. They fluttered back and forth as the wind hit them, but the book was a little too heavy to be pushed by the wind. The snow seemed loath to come up on the porch, so I didn't think that it would ruin it. When I closed the door, I hoped someone would see it before they opened it. I had added a little bit at the end, and as I sat shivering by the fire, I hoped they would notice the book and follow the instructions before barging in. Knock 3 times and open the door. Under no circumstances come in. If the house is empty, run away as fast as you can. If I'm here, hopefully you can help me escape. It was the last building of the day, a dark gray rectangle on a humdrum street in a forgettable neighborhood. The kind of place where the average tenant was a pearl-clutching 80-year-old who wouldn't buzz the door open for Christ himself. In my work as a gas meter inspector, I'd run into a lot of types like that. Even with my official-looking vest and clipboard, people were suspicious. I couldn't say I blamed them. After all, any psychopath could buy an official-looking vest and clipboard. By my 3rd week on the job, I could size up buildings by sight. I could usually tell whether I'd be dealing with a busy professional working from home, families with multiple children who were almost sure to be out of the house when I buzzed, or packs of young people who left their doors unlocked and often didn't even know what a gas meter was. I breathed a sigh of relief when I saw a bucket propping open the exterior door. The corridor was gloomy, but I could just make out a pudgy retiree in a sweater vest mopping the hallways. "Good afternoon," I waved from the street. "I'm for the gas company. Come on in, lad." His teeth glinted in the dim light. For some reason, those words sounded like a threat. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I realized I did not want to step into that dark hallway, with its ugly wood paneling, wet tile floor that smelled like bleach. The old man leaned on his mop expectantly. If I didn't register the building today, I told myself I'd just have to come back tomorrow. It'd be out of my way and off my route, and I was already barely meeting my quota. I sighed and I walked towards the janky, old-fashioned elevator. "It's a safe neighborhood, usually," the man commented as I passed. I realized why his voice seemed to snarl, why the light reflected so strangely on his teeth. They were made of metal, some kind of weird prosthetic. The old man must have noticed how I recoiled because he held out a hand to steady me. "A few weeks ago, I was walking down that very street outside the door when a group of teenagers came running up behind me. They grabbed my wallet and my watch, and when I tried to scream, they smashed out in my teeth a bottle." He smiled as if to demonstrate the delinquent's ghastly work. "Going up?" At least the guy didn't follow me into the elevator, I thought. As I rode the rickety thing up to the top floor as usual, I'd work my way down, knocking on doors and marking down the responses I received. No one was home in apartment 5A, apartment 5B, handwritten note was taped to the door, gas meter, 8043.24. We do not open the door for strangers. I rolled my eyes and took note of the number before continuing down the stairs. There was no natural light in the hallway, which was lit only by dusty wall lamps. The hair on the back of my neck was standing up, but I couldn't figure out just what it was about the place that unnerved me so much. It wasn't like this was the rundown tenement where a junkie had chased me around with a dirty needle, or the eerily clean penthouse where I'd found a heiress floating in a bathtub with her wrists cut. Even so, each time I knocked, I found myself hoping that no one and no thing would answer. When the door of apartment 4B opened just a crack, I think I actually jumped backward a little. Yeah? A cigarette dangled from the lips of the overweight blonde woman peering at me from the other side of the chain. She looked me over with worry and even fear in her eyes. What? I'm here to, oh, right, the gas. Well, come on in. I could hear the echo of cartoons and squealing kids from deep inside the apartment. Something bothered me about the way the woman had answered the door, but I was halfway to the meter before I realized what it was. She'd opened it almost as soon as I'd knocked, like she'd been listening for something. As I scooted around overflowing stacks of cardboard boxes, I told myself that I was letting my imagination run away with me. Sorry, the blonde woman coughed. We're still unpacking. It's all right, I said, slipping on a child's sock. I see why they can't keep tenants, though. She blew out a cloud of smoke. Whoever's in the apartment below us makes noise like you wouldn't believe. If I had a choice, I'd get out of here, but I can't afford it. Even if I could, I wouldn't want to do that to the kids. The move was rough on them. They keep having these dreams, you know. Night terrors, the doctor calls them. Yeah, well, change is hard when you're young. I was only half paying attention. My work app had just crashed. It was taking forever to reboot. When it finally finished loading, I input the number and flashed her a smile. All done. Have a good one. You too. She looked like she wanted to say something more, but she just gave me a tired little wave. She locked the door behind me as I left. I proceeded down to 3A and 3B. A knock on 3A's door received no answer. I was walking towards 3B when the door swung wide open. It was only darkness on the other side. Come in, an elderly woman's voice called out. I hesitated. Could you turn on the lights for me, please? No answer. My heart was racing as I stepped into the gloom. I ran my hand along the wall, feeling for a switch. The door slammed shut behind me. I would have sworn I heard an old woman's voice whispering in the blackness. Don't worry, Grandma won't let him get you. Suddenly I felt hard plastic beneath my fingers. A light switch. The bulb flicked on, receiving a dusty, empty room with grimy yellow walls. Hello? I ventured. No answer. I wanted to raise the blinds to let some exterior light in, but the cords had been cut. Besides, I wasn't supposed to touch anything other than the gas meter. As I walked past the lightless kitchen, I chanced to look inside. A pale man wearing nothing but filthy underwear stood with his back to me, holding himself and rocking back and forth. I muttered an apology and kept moving. I walked in on worse things, but the feeling of wrongness in this place was becoming impossible to ignore. I told myself that all I had to do was get to the end of the hallway and read that damn meter, and it'd all be over. I heard movement in a room across the hall. A child barely visible in the gloom. The gloom of the apartment's single light bulb reflecting its milky eyes. You shouldn't be here, the child snarled, taking a step towards me. He'll see you. Now I could see that his face was purplish, bloated. That there were bruises in the shape of bony hands around his neck. Grandma said she'd save us, but she couldn't, because this is his place, and nothing can protect you from him. I moaned and took a step back. Another child appeared behind the first, his neck twisted at an impossible angle. What's wrong with you? It called. Can't you see that you're in hell? The bathroom door creaked open. I ran. Sprinting past the kitchen, I noticed for the first time the bloodless knife wounds in the pale man's back. I could hear footsteps, but they weren't coming from the hallway. They were coming from above me. Filthy footprints appearing on the ceiling, closing in on where I stood. Whatever was making them panted with wet, excited breaths. I tugged on the doorknob. Of course it wouldn't open. Help? Help! I screamed, pounding on the door. In a few seconds, the thing would be right on top of me. A key turned in the lock, and I practically fell into the hallway. It was the retiree from earlier, still holding his mop bucket. "You got locked in or something?" He chuckled. "You're lucky the super gave me a spare set of keys." I moaned something incomprehensible and gestured over my shoulder, but there was nothing behind me but yellowed walls. "Let me guess," he snorted. "You saw his apartment was wide open, went inside, the door blew shut behind you? It happens all the time in this drafty old place. Keep telling the super he needs to fix the damn lock so that door doesn't creak open all the time and he won't lift a finger until some renter gets in there. Good luck with that. I wouldn't go in that apartment if you paid me." What do you mean?" I gasped, trying to keep up with the retiree as he walked back downstairs. "Oh, it was a tragedy. It was a real shame. You all know the old woman who lived there was a bit batty. Nobody realized how far gone she was, till it was too late. She thought that there was some kind of presence in the apartment, a him, she called it. So she convinced herself that he was going to take her grandkids away, so she strangled him in her sleep. And to protect him, she said. You believe that? Then when her son found out what she'd done, she stabbed him to death right there in the kitchen." The retiree shook his head as he locked up the mop and bucket in a grimy janitorial closet. Strangest part was how they found the old woman afterward. She was lying in the middle of the living room with a face like she'd been screaming her head off. Wasn't a mark on her. Like she'd been scared to death. Listen to me. Rambling on when you got a job to do. It's 1246.15. The retiree finished cheerfully. "What?" I mumbled. "My gas meter. 1246.15. Apartment 2A. You got that?" My legs felt weak. I staggered towards the door. "Hey!" the retiree shouted after me. "Where you going? Don't you have more apartments to check?" I did. But I didn't check them. Not that evening, nor any other. I turned in my resignation as soon as I got back to the office. My days of walking into strange apartments were over. What had happened in Unit 3B? That anonymous gray apartment complex, it stuck with me. It made me think that every building, just like every person, has its own true story. And some of those stories are horror stories. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and before we get started on tonight's story, I'm going to let you know about tonight's author. Mike Jesus is available on YouTube. So Mike Jesus also has his own series on YouTube of his own work. If you like this story that you're hearing today, you can hear a lot more of it on his channel that'll be in the link in the description down below, and on that little eye you'll find in the top corner of your screen. This is only one part of a full series. If you want to hear the whole 4-hour thing, I strongly suggest you check out his channel and give it a subscription. And now, on to tonight's story. The first time I met Lola was during a night out in university. I was drunkenly making my way back home with a poorly structured kebab, and she followed me. She was no bigger than my fist. It looked as if she'd been born inside of a drainage pipe. Yet, despite her size, she kept pace. She followed me all the way back to my dorm, eating up the trail of meat and salad I left in my wake, all while bravely meowing into the night. I never intended to keep her. Being drunk, I could scarcely plan past the next couple of hours. That night, however, I knew that Lola wasn't going to spend the night sleeping on the street. The kitten was more than willing to hide in a pouch of my hoodie to get past the security guard. The hangover in the morning was brutal, but Lola's purring made it bearable. Lola spent the rest of the year being the worst-kept secret in my student dorms, and then the next 3 years being the cuddly mascot of the flat I rented with my classmates. I got my degree and qualifications and went to become an IB-certified biology teacher. I'd hop around the international school circuit on 3-year contracts, and even though the culture and the continents changed, Lola remained a steady constant through my life. Didn't matter if it was hot or cold, or if the apartments were clean or covered in geckos. Lola was happy as long as there was someone to scratch behind the ears. A lot of the spots where I taught provided pretty steep hazard pay, and I'd found myself in situations which I'd rather have avoided, but Lola was the one constant in my years of traveling. She was a little piece of home I got to carry around. But nothing lasts forever, though. After 15 years of keeping me company, much of Lola's body had given out. She was blind in one eye and limp in one paw. Much of her day consisted of snoring in my lap. She'd still meow with the same pitch of the kebab-hungry kitten, but it was clear that Lola's time was running out. What made matters worse was that my 3-year contract was about to run out as well. After 3 years of teaching in the International School of Islamabad, I was set to start a 3-year stint in Prague. The day of flights and layovers would surely kill Lola. I couldn't bear the idea of having her final moments in the cargo hold of a plane. The thought of leaving her behind, however, that was just as bad. I mean, Lola was old and confused. I hated the idea of her going into the night without my company. Moving across the continent is hectic enough, but as the days counted down to my departure, all I could think about was the question of Lola. I had colleagues who offered to adopt her, and it was still possible to buy her a ticket, but each day I put off that decision. I lost sleep worrying over what would happen to my cat. I guess she felt it somehow. 3 days before my flight, after a night of complications, Lola eased my burden. She died. She died, and I held her paw, and I felt the last thud of her life leave her. At the vet's office, they offered to dispose of her body, but I declined. Instead, I had Lola packed into a little airtight plastic bag, and I took her home with me. I'd take her with me to Prague, and I'd get her cremated there. She could keep traveling with me. Turns out, however, that most conventional airlines aren't okay with transporting last-minute dead animals. So my final 2 days in Islamabad were spent on the phone with every single airline that connect back to Prague. I repeated the story of her death over and over and over again until it completely lost all meaning. No dice. See, no airline would transport her. It started to seem like I'd have to leave my Lola behind in shrink wrap. But then, on the 25th page of Google, I found a company that was willing to transport Lola. They had no customer service number, nor could I find any mention of them on the internet besides their website. But their FAQ was clear. Can I transport dead animals on Marana air flights? Yes. An option to purchase a pet ticket popped up. I didn't have much of a choice. Even though the cat was dead, she still had to be transported inside of an animal carrier. When I dropped off Lola at the cargo depot, the airport guards seemed really uncomfortable, but aside from that, everything else went smoothly. I took my flight to London a few hours later, and I was in Prague by sunrise the next day. Took a couple of calls, but eventually I found a pet cremation place that spoke English, and they understood my situation. Lola was due to arrive the following afternoon, and the cremation place wasn't far from the airport, so it started to feel like everything was figured out. The problem didn't start until I picked up Lola from the airport. The smell was the first thing I noticed. Even from the hallway, I could smell the undeniable stench of rot. It didn't occur to me that the smell could be tied to Lola's body. It wasn't until I got to the pickup point that I realized something was terribly wrong. The airport worker was young and uncomfortable. The first thing she said when she saw me was, "We tried giving her a bath, but it didn't help." The words scarcely connected to my brain before the carrier box was brought out. 2 eyes stared at me from inside the box, but I scarcely recognized them. The dark green plastic packaging Lola was wrapped up in lay shredded in the corner of the cage. The cat I was looking at looked like a carbon copy of Lola, but I didn't recognize it. The eyes were different. I stood there in absolute shock, staring at the living cat in the box. I knew I had to say something to the attendant, but no words came to me. I remained awestruck by the sight inside the box until the cat broke me out of my spell. With a large meow, the creature moaned in a voice that was low with exhaustion. I tried explaining to the attendant that this wasn't my cat. That my cat was dead, yet she just nervously laughed. When I kept on insisting that what arrived in that box was not what was sent, she called her supervisor. The supervisor also nervously laughed for a bit, and then he said that my issue was with the airline. I was told to contact their customer service line. I was also asked to leave the premises with my pet. Throughout the whole argument, through the whole bus ride back home, the cat kept on meowing from inside the box. It sounded nothing like Lola. It sounded like some horrid demon being exorcised and yelled no. The creature meowed through the whole bus ride back, and everyone bunched up by the driver to escape the smell. When I let the cat out of the box in my apartment, it moved with a terrible swiftness. Lola calculated each step she took, but the creature rushed through the room like a guided missile. Once it scanned the room, it jumped atop my kitchen counter, stared into my soul, and proceeded to howl. Meow. I opened all the windows in the apartment and immediately set to finding the contact number for Marana Air customer support. As hard as I tried, however, I couldn't find any trace of them. Not online or anything, though. The whole way through my fruitless search, the cat kept meowing, trying to ignore the entire existence of the creature at first, but then it occurred to me that it might just be hungry. When the first couple of Google pages didn't return any results, I grabbed my coat and went downstairs to buy the cat some food. Getting out into the corner store helped me escape the terrible smell, but my clothes still stank like I rolled in a garbage heap. When I returned back to the apartment, I gagged. The smell had soaked into everything I owned. It won't eat. It won't drink. All the cat does is sit and stare and moan in those horrid low tones. It looks like my Lola, but I know better. I know that Lola drifted off to sleep on a chemical cocktail thousands of miles away. Whatever is sitting in front of me isn't her. It might be using her body, but it isn't her. The email confirmation about Lola's ticket is linked to an email address that's a mix of random letters and numbers. My browser history shows no signs of the Marana Air, and the people at the airport keep on hanging up on me. I don't know what to do. And that's why I came here to this sleepless corner of the internet. If anyone knows what to do with this creature, if anyone has a shred of insight about how this could have happened, please reach out. August 4th, 2022. Today I woke up to the news that an old childhood friend of mine had suddenly passed away. I can't believe it. We were so close when we were younger, and I feel like a part of my life is now missing. I feel so helpless, like I can't do anything to bring him back. I feel so sad, and it feels like my heart's heavy. I can't help but think about all the fun times we had together growing up. All of our adventures, our secrets, even our arguments. I miss him so much, and I can't believe he's gone. I'm struggling to cope with the news, and it's hard to stay focused on anything else. I hope that writing in this journal will help me process my emotions and come to terms with what's happened. And that my friend would want me to remember the good times and continue to live life to the fullest. August 16th, 2022. I attended the funeral of my childhood friend, and I was overwhelmed with grief. As I looked around at everyone else in the room, I could feel sadness in the air. The service was beautiful. The pastor said some kind words about my friend that made me feel better. After the service, I went back to my friend's parents' house and spent some time with them. I was reminded of all the fun times we had together growing up. Never imagined that I'd be saying goodbye to my friend so soon. As I sat with my friend's parents, we reminisced about all the memories we shared. At the end of the visit, his parents gave me some old personal items that belonged to my friend. I was surprised to find a stack of old discs containing some Doom file backups. It was an emotional moment, but I'm grateful to have these items to remember my friend by. When I get home, I'll go through some of his old artwork and see what I can recover from the discs. August 18th, 2022. I spent some time looking through my friend's sketchbook, just in case there was something important in there. I had no idea what to expect, but I was definitely not prepared for the strange artwork that I found inside. The sketches were mostly abstract and dark, lots of imagery depicting death, sadness, despair. As I flipped through the pages, the artwork seemed to get increasingly darker, and I began to feel a sense of dread. I decided that I had seen enough and closed the book, feeling a little bit shaken. After that, I decided to try and take my mind off things and do some Amazon shopping. I needed a USB 3.5-inch floppy drive if I'm going to try and recover some of these old files. Lord knows whether anything can be retrieved from these discs. They're nearly 20 years old. Fingers crossed. August 20th, 2022. My package finally arrived in the mail, so I spent the day going through the old floppy disks. I plugged it in and started to play around with it. I was surprised to find that I could actually recover data from old floppy disks. I found some old files from my high school days that I thought were long gone, but here they were. My friend and I used to make Doom maps in high school. I was excited to find them again. But then I stumbled across a map I had never seen before. It was a map of my friend's house. I was so surprised to learn that he had been working on this map in secret. Playing this map made me realize that the best way to honor our friendship is to clean up his work and release it to the public. We never made any of our Doom stuff available to the others. I guess we were just young, we were intimidated by the great work being produced by the community, but I'm impressed with the quality of what's currently here in his map. I think it's a fitting tribute to clean it up for others to enjoy. August 25th, 2022. I spent this morning doing something I haven't done in years. Browse Doom World for the most recent Doom editing tools, and I was surprised how easy and accessible the new tools were compared to what I had used back in the mid-2000s. I ended up downloading Ultimate Doom Builder and Slade, both of which proved to be incredibly useful. Ultimate Doom Builder made mapping incredibly easy and straightforward. I was able to quickly create a basic map without much trouble, and I'm excited to see what I can achieve with a bit more practice. Slade was also much better at managing resources and trying to use WinText, which I remember using back in the day. I feel pretty comfortable now that I can finish my friend's map. Maybe add some new features to spruce it up as well. August 29th, 2022. I had the strangest dream last night about my childhood friend who recently passed away. We were playing Legos in his basement like we used to do as kids, and when I turned around, he was gone. The house was empty and silent. Everything was so quiet and still. I started to smell smoke and hear screams from upstairs. I ran upstairs, and when I got there, the house was just a burned frame. Smoke was getting thicker and thicker, and I could barely see or breathe. I searched for my friend, but I couldn't find him anywhere. I couldn't see anything. I started to panic, and then I found myself in the fog. I was alone, but I could hear low growls in the distance. When I woke up, I wished so badly that it was all just a dream, but I knew deep down that it was real. I just miss my friend so much, and it's hard to think that he's gone. There's nothing worse than letting your mind dwell on something. After a while, it starts to consume you. Just now, I decided to order a replacement set of smoke detectors with CO2 sensors, September 2nd, 2022. Today I made a post on Doomworld showing off my friend's map. There's more to do on the map, but hopefully this is the encouragement that I need to finish the map and push it out for release. I thought it would be a simple project, but the more I learn about the new UDMF features, the more things that I've added to make it, more interesting. I want the project to maintain the original aesthetic my friend was going for, but I'm trying to find the fine line between the original vanilla map and a cleaned up release that feels a little less 90s. October 3rd, 2022. October already. I'm super busy with work, so I haven't had time to work on the map. I did, however, go back and look through the sketchbook again and started scanning some of them into the computer for posterity. As I scrolled through the drawings, I could see that my friend had taken a dark turn. Each sketch seemed more unhinged and disturbing than the last. I felt a chill of worry run down my spine as I realized my friend's mental health might have been in a very fragile state. October 8th, 2022. Today was a long day at work, but I was really looking forward to coming home and getting some mapping in. I decided to order a pizza first, so I called up my favorite pizza place and placed my order. It felt so good to be able to relax and enjoy some good food. Once the pizza arrived, I set it aside and got to work on my Doom map. I've been working on it for a while now, and I'm making good progress. I'm determined to make my friend proud. I spent the next few hours tweaking and refining the map, and it felt really good to mess with some of the UDMF features. It's fun to align floors without having to draw new textures. Eventually, after a few hours, I decided to take a break, have some of that pizza I ordered earlier. After dinner, I went back to work on my map, making some more tweaks and finishing up some of the details. I can't wait to release it. I think people are going to love all the Doom cute elements in the map. October 13th, 2022. I know that sharing is a big part of the Doom community, but a small part of me doesn't want people to make modifications of this map. Mostly because I feel like this is a tribute and just a vessel for my feelings and emotions. Someone else making changes would feel inappropriate. But more importantly, I feel like something wants me to be the one to work on it. I can't explain it, but when I reached out to Z-Doom Discord members for help, it seemed like something didn't want me to upload it for others to work on. I mean, it sounds stupid because I ended up uploading a copy, but for a moment, I felt compelled to keep it for myself. Fortunately, my post on Doomworld is received well, and it seems most people aren't bothered by the idea that an author doesn't want to make their map available for modifications. November 4th, 2022. I had an incredibly vivid dream last night. This has been happening for several weeks now, so I feel like I should start documenting them. I'll do my best to recall the events in my dream. I awoke in a cold sweat, my heart was pounding in my ears. I felt a chill run down my spine, and I knew something was wrong. I lay in bed too afraid to move when I heard a faint, ghostly cry coming from the attic. I heard the sound before, but this time it was louder and more insistent. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just my imagination, but the more I tried to push it away, the louder it became. I had no choice but to investigate. I got out of bed and slowly crept up the stairs to the attic, my heart pounding so hard I thought that it would burst. As I entered the attic, I noticed a trail of children's toys leading out the window. I followed the trail, feeling a strange compulsion to do so. The trail led me to an abandoned daycare center near the edge of town. I stayed back, afraid to enter, but I couldn't help but feel drawn to the place. I knew something was waiting for me inside, something dark and dangerous. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The place was dark and silent, but as I walked around, I noticed the walls were covered in eerie drawings of children and babies. Then I heard the sound of a baby crying again, coming from the back of the room. I followed the sound, and when I reached the back of the room, I saw a crib with a stillborn baby inside. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized what was haunting me. The stillborn baby was the one in the attic. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding in my ears. I knew I had to leave this place, and I quickly ran out the door, never looking back. November 13th, 2022. It's been a long day, and I'm exhausted. I had every intention of getting some rest earlier today, but here I am, still wide awake and struggling to keep my eyes open. I can't help but feel like I'm forgetting something, but I can't put my finger on it. I had so much planned for today. Did I? I'm trying to remember what I did yesterday, but it's all a blur. Was I working on the Doom map? I feel like I must have been, but I can't remember adding any new geometry or details. And all the new scripts seem completely foreign to me. I don't remember writing them. So frustrated. Starting to get really worried that maybe this insomnia is making me crazy. It's late now, and I'm determined to get some proper sleep tonight. Hopefully I can make some sense of all this in the morning. November 23, 2022. I was actually able to get some sleep last night. However, I continue having these vivid, cryptic dreams, and they keep feeling more personal and unsettling. I'm starting to prefer the tiresome days to my dreams. I was dreaming about taking a nice hot bath. I felt myself sinking deeper and deeper into the warm water until I couldn't breathe. I tried to scream, but no sounds escaped my lips. I was drowning in my own bathtub. Suddenly, I felt a jolt, as if I'd been pulled out of the water, and when I opened my eyes, I found myself in a subterranean cave, illuminated by a faint, eerie blue light. I could feel a chill in the air, and I could hear the echoing of demons in the distance. I tried to scream, but my voice was muffled by the darkness of the cave. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized I was being hunted by something unseen. I heard the scraping of claws on the rocks, felt the ground shaking beneath me. I was terrified. I started to run. I ran and ran until I found a small crevice in the wall of the cave. I squeezed through it and hid in the darkness, hoping the demons wouldn't find me. Eventually, I woke in my own bed, safe and sound. But I couldn't help but feel a lingering fear that the demons, they were still out there, watching and waiting. December 7th, 2022. It's 4:30 a.m. and I'm still up working on this map for Doom. I can't believe I've been up this late. Must be exhausted. I'm not sure why, but I'm having trouble sleeping lately. I just can't seem to shut my mind off. I'm really starting to feel the effects of it, too. I've been more irritable than usual. My coworkers said they've noticed a change in my behavior. I'm also a lot more on edge, jumpier than I used to be. I'm playing back the map to check my work, and I'm finding all these new additions I don't remember adding. It's like the map has had a mind of its own, but I mean, that's impossible, right? Maybe I'm just exhausted and not thinking straight. I guess I should take it as a sign that I need to get some rest. December 16th, 2022. Today I decided to take a day off work. I'm so tired. I can't focus anymore. I've been having trouble sleeping for weeks now. I just needed the rest. I'm glad Christmas is coming soon so I can spend time with my family. I'm looking forward to it, even though I don't really feel like being around people. It's nice to have some time away from the school and just relax. Sure, there'll be a lot of fun and there'll be plenty of laughter and good times. Here's hoping that I'll be well rested and ready to face the world again soon. December 17th, 2022. Don't attempt to type while sleepy. December 8, 2022. I was in the bathroom, standing in front of the mirror, shaving. As I looked at my reflection, I noticed it winked at me. It was so strange and unexpected that I threw my razor at the mirror. I was so scared that I expected the mirror to shatter, but instead it stayed intact. I was even more surprised when I put my hand through the mirror and I could feel the glass. I kept going and I was able to climb all the way into the mirror. It was like a tunnel. When I looked back, I saw myself in the mirror, and this time I winked back. It was so surreal, but I felt like I belonged there. There was something comforting about being in the mirror, like it was my home. I woke up feeling so confused and shocked. I still can't believe it was just a dream. January 4th, 2023. Today was supposed to be my first day back at work after the holiday break, but I decided to take one more day off to work on myhouse.wad. I've been spending hours every day mapping out and organizing the project, but I'm starting to feel like it's taking on a life of its own. Despite being unable to remember making many of the changes, I keep finding new things appearing in the project. I'm starting to feel a little paranoid, like someone or something is watching me and controlling the direction of the project. It's a strange feeling. I'm not sure how to explain it, but I just feel like I'm not in control anymore. It's a little unnerving, but I'm determined to finish this. January 7th, 2023. I was driving along a road in the woods. Well, all of a sudden my car veered off the road and crashed into a tree. I woke up to find myself in the driver's seat with an uninjured and bleeding leg. My head was spinning. I felt disoriented. I dragged myself out of the car and hobbled my way through the woods in hopes of finding help. My leg was in agony and I felt like I was going to faint. Through the trees, I saw the lights from a lonely gas station. I was relieved to find it open, but then I realized that there was nobody there. I had no idea where everybody had gone. As I was standing there, I heard some strange noises coming from the woods around me. I was too scared to investigate, so I just stood there feeling scared and alone. Suddenly, I heard a car in the distance, and I limped towards it. Thank goodness, it was a taxi driver who was able to take me to the hospital. I eventually woke up in a cold sweat. Not sure if I was relieved or disappointed that it was just a dream. January 13th, 2023. I have an extended weekend because of MLK Day, so I thought I'd try to wrap things up before March. I had trouble opening the map. Doombuilder and Slade both reported being unable to locate the file. Apparently during a previous editing session, I compiled the map as a PK3 file, and both editors were looking for a previous copy in a .wad format. I've been reading tutorials on how to convert WAD files to PK3, and I must have thrown everything into a new file at some point in an exhausted stupor because I don't remember actually converting the project into a different format. January 14th, 2023. Last night I had a nightmare that felt so real I can still feel the fear and terror coursing through me as I write this. I was on an airplane. I was the only passenger. I looked out the window to see the ground below and noticed that the terrain was unfamiliar. I had no idea where I was or where I was going. Suddenly the plane started to shake violently and I heard a loud noise coming from the engine. In the distance I could see a huge storm cloud coming towards me. I tried to communicate with the pilot, but I couldn't hear him over the sound of the engine. The plane began to dive and suddenly I felt a huge jolt. I looked out the window again and saw that the plane was heading for some kind of structure. I closed my eyes. I felt the plane crash. I felt the impact. I heard the screams and the cries from the people around me. I then woke up. my heart pounding and my body drenched in sweat. January 21st, 2023. I don't know if it's the memories of my friend that keep flooding back while working on this map, but I need to take a break. This project, which began as a simple cleanup and release as a memorial, it's consumed all of my free times, hours that pass. I'm not aware of the time when we're familiar with the work added to the map. I'm going to stop mapping for a while. Come back later when I'm in a better place. January 22nd, 2023. I mapped again last night. January 23rd, 2023. And tonight, January 31st, 2023. I'll take a break for real this time. I hope it'll let me. February 14th, 2023. Happy Valentine's Day to the only person I ever loved. For a short time, you brought a little happiness to this painful existence called life. I hope we can be together again one day. In the meantime, I'll keep looking for that other someone who can be the ray of light in my life that you turned out to be. February 19th, 2023. I didn't make this area of the map. I'm sure of it. It's still the house that Thomas started all those years ago, but different. It's changed. The map I've been detailing and cleaning up for release is still here, but it's now intertwined with too many tags and sector references to separate it from the new areas. I'd be more disturbed if it wasn't so beautiful. February 20th, 2023. I took more time off work to finish the map. After 13 years, I've got the hours, but more important, the map needs me. Without my guiding hand, the map doesn't know what to build. I can help it. I can guide it. It seems to respond to my designs, changing them to match my emotional state. It knows what I'm feeling. It knows how Thomas felt. February 26, 2023. I can no longer tell what elements of this map are my friends and which are mine, and what the map's created. I'm no longer afraid that the map's creating itself. It needs me as much as I need it, which reminds me of a dream I had the other night. I'm not sleeping much, but I recall this one with surprising clarity. I was standing on a beach, staring out at the placid water, the ocean stretching out as far as the eye could see. Seagulls cawing overhead, and the gentle caress of water lapped the sand in front of me. I dipped my toes in the water. At least I tried. There was no water, no ocean. It was an illusion. I realized everything around me was fake. The trees, the birds, the sand, it was all a one-act play, and I was Willie Loman, a damn fool who believed in something greater, but there was no happiness to be found. I wandered the set only to find myself staring into oblivion. It was the end of time itself. No joy, no misery, no sadness, only emptiness. Men of faith tell us the afterlife is for eternity. But is it possible to keep your sanity for eternity? A day passes in the void, a month, a year, 2, 5, 10. Is this an eternity? 20 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. I've sat in this room for 1,000,000 years now, entertaining the same thoughts, pondering the same questions, and ruminating on every mistake in my life, anguishing over them for centuries, 1,000,000,000 years now. Double that. Now double it again. I'm still nowhere close to the end of eternity. I pray for death, but it never comes. Just me and my thoughts and my mistakes and my insecurities and my regrets and my loneliness. Somewhere in another dream, the version of myself that winked back is sitting on the real beach, happy and content, knowing life is finite. There is no afterlife, and happiness is found in the small things around us that we can control. Happiness has to be fought for. March 2nd, 2023. I was wrong. The map is using me. This morning I loaded a Doom Builder backup file from late October and spent a few hours preparing the map for release. I tried to delete myhouse.pk3, but I kept getting a file and use error. I don't think the map will let me. I'm going to post it on the Doom World tonight, but I don't want anyone playing anything other than the original vanilla release. Whatever this map is doing to me, I can't let it do the same to others. March 9th, 2023. I swear I uploaded the safe copy, but my house.pk3 was uploaded by mistake. I don't know if a lot of people were able to download the map before I fixed the link, but hopefully I caught it in time. Oh my god, there it is! Stop the car, Jacob! Lily exclaimed as the house she saw in the ad came into view. Lily and Jacob had lived in the same neighborhood for most of their 12-year marriage. They had liked the area when they moved in, but their once peaceful neighborhood had seen its share of crime and decline lately. The straw that broke the camel's back and made them decide to move had been 3 nights ago when they were out to dinner. They had been celebrating their 12-year anniversary when someone broke into their home and ransacked the place. Anything of value that wasn't locked in the safe was taken. When the police finally got there, they acted as though they couldn't care less. They were absolutely no help. So the next day, Lily went online to find a new house in their price range. Lo and behold, she found a lovely house a few neighborhoods over, on the nicer side of town. It was a closer commute to Jacob's work and was well within their price range. Lily had wasted no time in calling the number on the ad to set up a walkthrough. They had set it up for that Saturday morning, but when Saturday arrived, Lily had gotten a text telling her to go ahead and have a look at the place and the code to the key lockbox on the door. The owner said he wouldn't be able to make it, but if they wanted to take a look, to go right ahead. Just be sure to return the key when they were done, and let them know what they had thought. Jacob was very reluctant and wanted Lily to reschedule for a time when the owner could join them, but Lily wouldn't hear of it. She threatened to go herself, but that seemed to make up Jacob's mind, and he agreed to come with her. As they pulled into the driveway, Lily could hardly contain herself. She jumped out of the car and rushed to the porch, stretching her arms and taking a deep breath. The scent of gardenias filled her nose. The smell reminded her of the summer she spent with her grandma as a child. In fact, the front porch reminded her a little of her grandparents' home. The long porch stretched the whole front of the house, and it had several weather-worn rockers, swings hanging from a pair of chains. Had her grandma had a swing like this? Had she sat on it and swung with her when she was a little girl? Had she gone too high, perhaps? Jacob leaned out the window, his hand over the phone. "Sweetheart, it's work. I have to take this call. I'll catch up with you as soon as I'm done." Lily gave him a tart look and shrugged. She took one more deep breath before mounting the porch and approaching the front door. She had seen it on Zillow when she was looking for houses, and it had been one of the biggest reasons that she wanted the place. It had 8 squares on the front, and they were green, red, and green, just like her grandparents' door. She could remember standing in front of that door as a little girl, feeling excited as she waited for it to open. Since her grandmother wasn't going to let her in this time, she put in the passcode and got the key to open the door. The door opened with a little creak, and Lily stepped inside with a broad grin. Jakob looked up at Lily as she walked into the house, thinking of how beautiful she looked as she walked past the threshold. He couldn't have known this could be the last time that he would ever see her. As Lily stepped into the front hall of the house, she felt a bit of déjà vu. She felt like she was coming home, as if she had been there 1,000 times before. To her right was a large archway that led into a sitting room. Lily decided to check out that room first since it was the closest, and there was a window so she could look out to see if Jacob was coming in. As she walked into the room, she felt a change in the atmosphere, and the whole place seemed to shift. Lily walked to the window to call out to Jacob, but when she looked outside, his car was no longer in the driveway. Instead, there were several familiar-looking cars. Was that her parents' car from when she was 9? And the car looked like Aunt Judy's car. That truck parked in the street, that looked just like her grandparents', but that was impossible. She watched her parents sell that car when she was 10. What was going on? As she stood there confused, she heard a voice calling to her. Lily turned around, but she was no longer alone. Her family filled the couch and chairs. The room looked just like her grandma's sitting room from when she was a child. She could remember seeing everyone seated like this once before, and the memory made her feel kind of crawly. As a child, they had often sat in this room during holidays and special occasions, but something was off today. Something wasn't quite how she remembered it. Everyone looked as though they'd been crying. She didn't remember this scene from her childhood quite like this. Something was wrong. As she abandoned her place next to the window, she walked as though in a haze to where her mother sat. She looked up as Lily approached and patted the couch next to her, motioning for her to sit. Her mother put an arm around her, not an altogether family feeling, and when Lily spoke, her voice was that of a young child again. "What's wrong, Mama?" Lily said, looking around at everyone and seeing tears welling up in their eyes. Her father spoke first. "Lilybug, there's been an accident. Your grandma fell down the basement stairs. She didn't make it." As those words left his mouth, everyone began to wail, and Lily felt her mother press her face against her head. Lily sat speechless, trying to process what she'd heard. This wasn't how she remembered this, was it? Lily got up from her spot on the couch and began to pace. Her memories of that day were fuzzy, but as she walked between the couch and window, they began to solidify. She remembers her family telling her grandma had gone to see her sister in Boca, but not that she was dead. When Lily turned back to confront her mother, though, she found she was alone again in the sitting room. The furniture, her family, everything was gone. The room was as it was when she walked through the front door. Lily shuddered as a palpable chill went through her. "Looks like a goose walked over your grave," she heard her grandmother say. It was as if she was just in the other room. Lily rushed to the front door to get out of the house, wanting nothing so much as to smell the gardenias again, before she jumped in the car and told Jacob to drive away. She should have listened to him. They should have waited. But she had been so eager to see this place. If it had brought back so many memories, so many times that made her feel young again, that was gone now. She didn't care how dangerous her neighborhood was. She'd gladly live there for the rest of time if it meant that she could leave this mausoleum. The door, however, was gone. The entryway was still there, but the wall where the front door should have been was blank. She ran back to the sitting room window and started pounding on it, trying to get Jacob's attention. His car was back, her husband sitting on the front seat, but he didn't seem to hear her. "Jacob, help me!" she screamed. But Jacob didn't answer. He glanced up, and then looked back down at his phone, talking with Terry or Mark or whoever it was that was calling him from work. He couldn't see her. He didn't know she was stuck. And suddenly, Lily realized she was alone. If she was going to get out of here, she'd have to do it herself. Lily thought she might as well look for another way out, and as if summoned, she noticed the hallway that ran opposite the sitting room. There'd be a bathroom down there, if she remembered right. Some cold water on her face sounded exactly like what she needed. She headed to the bathroom, but as she got closer, she felt that strange shiver again. As she came closer, she could hear the sound of sloshing water, as if someone was splashing frantically in the bathtub. Lily stepped cautiously to the door that separated her from the small bathroom, and peeked in as the old wooden barrier made a fun creak in protest. She could see her father knelt down at the side of the tub. Then she could see him holding her mother's head under the water. Lily stepped back, the door opening to give her a terrible view of her mother drowning. But it all seemed wrong. That wasn't how she remembered that horrible time when she was 12, was it? I mean, Lily remembered her father trying to help her mother out of the tub as she had a seizure. She remembered him trying but not being able to save her. This new reality of what really happened hurt her brain more than her heart, and Lily tore off in a mad scramble to be away from the awful sound of her mother drowning again and again. Lily ran to the staircase that lay beyond the foyer and darted up the steps without thinking of where she was going. As she ran into one of the bedrooms, her mind still reeling from the scene below, the feeling of deja vu came yet again. She took in the room she had just run into. She could see a crib with a mobile twirling overhead. The smiling yellow ducks spun drunkenly, but even their placidity could bring no joy to this scene. This was her son's room. "No," she pleaded. "Not this memory." Her husband walked into the room holding their 3-week-old son to his chest. It should have brought her joy to see him again until she realized her wonderful husband was holding little Jonathan's face to his chest, muffling the sound of his cries. He didn't seem to notice her watching him. Didn't seem to care at all that he was snuffing the life from what would be their only child. After the baby had stopped crying, Jakob kissed him on his little cheek and placed him in his crib. But no, that's not how that had gone at all. Lily's memory was fuzzy, but she remembered Jakob holding their baby and comforting him till he fell asleep. When she had awoken and noticed that Jonathan hadn't woken up for a feeding yet, she went to his room and found him cold and blue in his crib. She screamed for her husband, and Jakob had rushed to her side to find her cradling their poor baby as if she could bring him back to life. They called 911, but when the EMTs arrived, they said that it was too late. His death was stated as Sid's, and the two had been left to mourn their loss. Lily didn't know how much more she could take in this house. She slid down the wall crying as the crib vanished and the room once again was empty. Lily sat there for a few minutes getting her bearings, then she got up and slowly walked down the stairs. She didn't want to see any more, but she knew that she had to get out of this house if she intended to have any sanity left when she escaped. As Jakob sat in the front seat talking to his boss, he realized Lily had not come out of the house. It had been at least an hour since he told her that he would catch up. She should have been able to see the whole place twice in an hour. He looked up at the window that overlooked the front yard, hoping to see her looking at him. No such luck. Hey, listen, Mark, we can handle the rest on Monday. I need to go check on Lily. She's alone in the house we're both supposed to be looking at. I'm getting a little worried about her, okay? So, yeah. Okay, I'll see you on Monday. Hey, bye. As Jakob climbed out of the car and walked towards the porch, he could smell a familiar smell. He stopped in the walkway and took a deep whiff, savoring a scent that he hadn't smelled in years. It was bourbon and cigar smoke. It reminded him of Saturday night poker games at his dad's house. Dad's poker nights had been full of both, and Jakob remembered peeking in as a kid so he could watch the festivities. He got to the door and tried to open it to join his wife, but the door was locked. He knocked, wondering why she had locked it behind herself, as she wanted him to come and look too. "Hey, Lily," he called out. "Let me in, sweetheart. Sorry it took so long. You know how much of a windbag Mark can be." But Lily didn't respond. He knocked a little louder. Still no response. At this point, Jakob began to worry that something had happened to her. He pounded on the door, his fears coming back at the thought of what could have happened. Hadn't he thought this sounded like a great way to get robbed or kidnapped? He didn't know this guy from Adam, and he had just let his wife... What had he been thinking? "Lily!" he shouted as he beat on the door. But no answer came. Lily walked down the steps into the basement as if in a trance. She was numb from the torture this house had put her through and just wanted to be outside in the sun again before it could show her anything else. As she descended the basement stairs, the air shifted again, and she steadied herself for what was next. She opened her eyes to see that she was in her own basement. But something was off. The shelf where she kept her Christmas ornaments was pushed away from the wall. As she walked over to see why it was pushed away, she saw a trapdoor under where the shelf usually sat. The door was open, and Lily could hear something down there. Whatever it was crying out softly, as though too weak to scream. Jakob, worried and a little angry, decided to try to find another way in. He walked around to the back of the house, but as he came to the gate, he too felt that overpowering sense of déjà vu. When he got to the backyard, he saw a swing set looking lonely in the open space. It looked like his old swing set from when he was a child, and he walked curiously towards it. When he reached the swings, Jakob sat down and looked at the back door. He realized it looked like his childhood door. He scrunched up his eyes as he tried to make sense of it. He'd spent a lot of time on this swing while Dad talked to Mom. As he watched the window by the door, Jakob saw people inside talking loudly, their silhouettes performing sad little plays for his child's eyes. But this isn't how he remembered it happening. Or was it? It had been just another fight. His dad starting it like always. The mailman had been sitting at their kitchen table when he came home, a cold towel on his head as he drank a glass of Mom's lemonade. He had nearly collapsed on the front lawn in the heat, and though his father had smiled when he saw the man cooling off in the kitchen, Jakob had seen his mother flinch when she looked at him. His father had waited till after dinner to tell his son to go play out back while they talked, and his mother had seemed to beg him with her eyes not to leave. Jakob watched as his dad reached for something on the counter, and his mom's silhouette backed away slowly. His dad lunged in sudden rage, and Jakob imagined he heard the frying pan connecting with the side of her head. His dad's dark afterimage stood over her for a few minutes, the pan coming down a few more times until sanity seemed to reassert itself. He stood up, the image realizing that it had talked a little too vigorously this time. Jakob could almost see the lack of confidence in the outline as it weighed its options. When it looked out at him, Jakob realized his father meant to make him an accomplice in his folly. "Jakob!" his dad yelled from the doorway. "Go give me a shovel from the shed. Then I need you to get in the truck and wait for me." Jakob hopped dutifully off the swing with much smaller feet than his own. He was horrified at his blind fantasism, but understanding it all too well. As he ran to the shed to fetch the shovel, he realized that the memory of this night that his mom left him wasn't the way he remembered it. Dad wasn't planting a garden to surprise his mom with. Mom hadn't left them for the fella who ran the register at Ralph's. He did what he was told, though. and grabbed the shovel. He gave it to his dad and ran to the truck as his father began grunting at something that must have been very heavy in the kitchen. It couldn't have been his mother. Jacob's mom ate like a bird. Surely he wouldn't have had to strain so much to lift her. As soon as Jacob got into the truck, everything became hazy again. He realized he was back in his own car, his father's truck gone. As Jacob sat there, he began to cry. He didn't want to cry. He hadn't cried in so long, but he found the tears just wouldn't stop. He was terrified of what had just happened. He was scared of a man that he had buried 10 years ago. He was grieving for his mother in a way that he'd never managed when he was 8. Above all else, Jacob was worried about his wife. "Hello?" Lily whispered as she descended the stairs. "Who's down there? Do you need help?" she whispered, understanding the irony of her question a little too late. As she spoke, the whimpering stopped. It was dark and damp down here. The floor made of packed dirt, and the smell of earth and iron filled her nose. As she felt around for a light switch, she could hear something shifting across the room. Lily paused for a second, trying to listen to what it was. It was hard to hear over the sound of her heart beating in her ears, and Lily was afraid of getting snuck up on by the specters in the house again. She found a small chain hanging down from a bulb in the low ceiling. As she pulled it, the small light lit the room pathetically. But what she saw still terrified her. This was not any memory that she ever had. She looked to where the sound was coming from and found herself staring back from a dirty mattress on the floor. She was battered and beaten, starved, and with one hand attached to the wall by a metal cuff. Lily, in shock, started to back away but heard someone walking in the basement. She quickly turned off the light and backed up against the far wall, praying the darkness would hide her. As the steps got closer, Lily felt around for something to defend herself with, just in case the person came downstairs. As she slid her hand across the cold dirt, she found what felt like a pipe and picked it up as she held it to her chest. A moment later, she could hear heavy footfalls coming down the cellar stairs. She closed her eyes and prayed that she wouldn't be seen. When she opened her eyes again, she was no longer in the cellar. She was at the front door. Jacob got himself together and returned to the backyard to find a way in. The swing set was gone, as was the shed. The back door was no longer his childhood back door either. This door was white with a blue ruffle at the top of a window, and the realization made him feel a little bit better. He rushed up the 3 steps to the door and turned the knob. The door opened easily, and as he walked over the threshold into the kitchen, he felt the shift again. He was in his dad's kitchen, and his father was talking to a police officer. "Mr. Daniels, do you know of anywhere your ex-wife would have gone to?" the officer asked, tapping his pencil on a notebook that looked ancient. "No, officer. Like I told you all before, she called me 3 weeks ago, asking me to pick up my son because she needed a break from him. He could be a handful, so I agreed and went over to get my boy. She didn't tell me where she was going or when she'd get back. Jacob, go on to your room now and go play. Let me and these officers finish our conversation." He had been 9 when the officers had come to question his father. Jacob knew better than to disagree with his dad, but he knew that his mother had made no such request. At the time, it had seemed that maybe his dad had been confused, but Jacob would find out later that his mother had divorced him and left town with someone else. She'd never tried to see Jacob again, and his father telling the police a lie had always seemed weird to him. One look at his father's flinty eyes, however, had told him to do as he was told, and Jacob ran for the staircase in the living room. As Jakob walked towards the doorway, he looked back towards his father, only to find that everything was gone. The kitchen was empty, save for him. Lily reached for the handle of the door, turning the knob with trepidation. Was this another trick? Some new game for the house to tease her with? She had never given up hope that she would get out, but she thought that she might have believed the house would keep her there forever anyway. Would they even find her body, she wondered? Would they know it was hers if they did? The door swung open, and Lily was again assaulted by the smell of gardenias. She came down the steps, running over the walk, and found the car exactly where she'd left it. She almost saw Jakob sitting there, the phone still pressed to his ear, but when she stuck her head into the window, she found the car empty, the keys still in the ignition. Lily wasn't sure what to make of this, and as she sat in the passenger seat, her mind started trying to make sense of what she'd seen. She realized her marriage, her whole life, it was full of lies. Her mind made up memories to protect her from reality, but the house showed her the truth. She remembered what her father had done to her mother, what her husband had done to her son. She felt disgust well up inside of her. How could I have been so stupid? She whispered to herself, tears coming unbidden. It still didn't explain why she had seen herself down in that cellar in such a state. As Lily thought about it, she realized she needed answers. She climbed over to the driver's side and turned the key. The engine came to life, and Lily peeled the tires as she headed home. She wouldn't feel safe in that house until she checked the basement to be sure of what was there. But Jakob would be angry if he came back to find the car missing, and if such a place existed in her home, she'd likely find herself there if he made it home. Jakob called out to Lily, hoping to find her safe and sound as he made it to the stairs. He could hear someone upstairs, and he kept calling for his wife as he ascended. He could hear someone crying in the bedroom to the right of him, and he was afraid that she had gotten hurt, or worse, that someone had hurt her. "Hey, sweetheart, is that you? Are you okay?" he called out. He slowly opened the door and peeked in to see himself holding their son. His wife cried as she watched him smother their son. The baby had been crying for hours, and Jakob couldn't handle the high-pitched squealing anymore. He snapped. He was something he regretted every day. He had tried to move from beneath the shadow of his father, especially after what he had done to Lily. But it seemed that you never quite forget the old ways and the old lessons. He reached for Lily as she lay there crying, but as his hands passed through her, she turned to dust beneath his fingers. Everything melted away like dandelion fluff, and suddenly the room was empty. As he backed out of the room, he heard sobbing from the bedroom across the hall. Jacob's hands shook as he reached for the knob, but he had to find Lily. He had to make her understand how sorry he was for their son's death. He peeked inside as the door creaked open, and he could see his own bedroom inside. Lily was crying as she spoke with someone on the phone. She was talking about... Oh, God. She was talking about his little secret. She had found the root cellar, the shame that he had hidden for years. And now she knew everything. He charged in trying to stop her, but as soon as he crossed the threshold, it all melted away. Jacob's father had often said that the apple didn't fall far from the tree, and Jacob supposed he'd been right. Lily had taken a lot of convincing, a lot of mental conditioning, but Stockholm Syndrome was an interesting thing. She never remembered how she'd come to be in Jacob's basement after he took her from her work one evening. She never questioned how they'd been married for 12 years, but he'd only snatched her 7 years ago. She had accepted that there was no pictures of their wedding because of the fire that had burned their apartment. She had accepted that their son had died of SIDS, too, though he thought maybe that one had been harder to swallow than the rest. In many ways, it was like her mind created answers for questions before they were asked. By the sound of it, she'd been doing it most of her childhood. Jacob's childhood had been fraught, But Lily's had been something from a pulp novel. She had been happy to forget. Happy to cloud her own mind with misty memories and rose-colored tint, but this damn house had probably shown her all sorts of things that pulled the wool from her eyes. As Jacob sat in this empty room, he wondered if prison would be worse than living in his warped memories for the rest of time. The whispers from the house told him he'd never get to know. There'd be no open door waiting for someone like Jacob. The house had a new toy, a new rat in its cage, and Jacob would never bask in the sun again. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I want to tell you thanks so much for watching tonight's video or listening to tonight's episode of the podcast. Quick reminder, I am also a narrator over at Chilling. If you guys like the stories that you're listening to here, then I'm sure you'll like the stories that you can listen to over at Chilling, because they're almost the same thing. I'm still narrating them, but you can select your own background music or background sounds, and you can select a whole mess of other narrators, such as Autumn Ivy, Swamp Dweller, and a bunch of my other friends. If you guys are interested in checking out Chilling app, starting up with a free trial, you can use the link in the description down below, or you can head over to thechillingapp.com and also use those free trials to win prizes from their giveaways. And as always, I would love to give a big thank you to everyone who's supporting me over on Patreon. You guys are the real MVPs. You guys keep things going, especially while things have been nuts for me over the past couple of months, and things have been getting crazier and crazier as time goes on. You guys are the ones who are keeping me sane, and I mean that with all sincerity, that you guys have helped me immensely. So, in my personal life and my professional life, I want to give a very big thank you to Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Jacob Fenske, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, LaQueda, Canizales, MrCreepyPasta Pepper Pleaser, Travis, Joseph Calarudo, Would It Be, Dante Kinkade, Foxhound 803, Mephistopheles, CursepoxPrimarch, Bastion Beefcake, Jeff the Killer's Cultist, Love You Eminem M, Insanity Gamer X, Jesus Cornejo, Yarghoul, Amber Clark, Jay Kearns, Himbo Jerry, Sama High, Crusader Chocobo, Adamarius, Captain Scurvy, Estadine, Braden Morris, Nate Cull, Our Minsect Time, Angelus, Seclude, That Creepy Chick, Red Shadow Cat, Xavier and Cheyenne, 6 Gay Rats in a Trench Coat, Turtleman, Cryolinium, Lord Life's Best, Goring Try Magazine, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Michael Limchock, Dirk Diver 030, Matt Bach, Voice of Sand, Shelly J, Fikamel, Deleted Account, Melted Lake, Tully Sue, William King, Sashi Suzaku, Stricken, Freddy Krueger, Happy Birthday Jason Wilson, Lisa Cottrell, Caspian, Hades Nephew, Peter Chip, Acid System, Mog, Kiri the Sloth, Fester's Lampshade, Nico Kyle, The Ginger Bros, and Stormcrow, Daniel Polson, and Corey Kenshin. To everyone on this list, everyone in the description, and of course anyone who could support even just $1, thank you all so much for making my life significantly easier with this. And if you guys would like to be able to join any of the names that you see here or down there or anything at all, head over to patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. And with that, I wish you all a very, very pleasant night and sweet dreams.